Have you ever like stopped and thought about how much your name like actually says about you? Not just, your personality, but like where you fit into history and culture and maybe even like your future. Today we are going to deep dive into this whole world of socio-onomastics.
Hmm.
It's basically where names become way more than just, simple labels.
Yeah, that's right. Socionomastics is really about seeing names as these cultural fingerprints that can reveal these hidden patterns and stories about society, about personal identity and how those two kind of like intertwine.
So to get to the heart of this, um, we've got a really interesting mix of sources for this deep dive. We've got a tech blogger over in France who's been doing like some really cool stuff, visualizing like trends in French first names. We've also got some academic papers that are looking at large language models, which are those AI systems that seem to be able to do just about anything these days. And we're also going to be drawing on the work of Baptiste Coumont, who's this leading French sociologist who spent, his career trying to understand names. So yeah, lots to dig into.
Yeah, and I think what's really cool about all these different sources is how they all point to this idea that names are like, cultural time capsules. They capture the like trends and values and influences of a certain time, almost like a historical snapshot.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
This blogger, he built this really like awesome platform where you can see how different French first names have like risen and fallen in popularity over time. It's like you're watching history unfold one name at a time.
It's amazing. And that's socio-onomastics, right? Like
Yeah.
in action. We
Yeah.
see this with names like Kevin, which became like super popular in France back in the 1990s.
Oh, interesting. Any guesses why?
Well, I bet you could guess. I'm going to say American pop culture probably had a little something to do with that.
I was going to say like Kevin Costner, Kevin Bacon.
Exactly. Like those guys were huge in the 90s. But then what's interesting is that Kevin kind of became a little, how do I say this? It became a little stigmatized. It got associated with, certain socioeconomic groups. And so you see how a name can become like kind of loaded, right?
Yeah.
It's almost like it reflects back these societal anxieties about class and moving up or down in society.
Yeah, that's super interesting. So a name that like starts out trendy and even aspirational can end up with like a totally different set of baggage. Like the name itself goes on like a cultural journey,
Exactly.
reflecting like all those changing perceptions.
That's a great way to put it. And it's not just Kevin, of course. Like, take the name Marie in France. It's been popular, like, forever. And that's because of its religious connections,
Oh,
right?
right.
Like, to the Virgin Mary and traditional Catholic values, which have had a huge influence, obviously, on French history and culture.
So even though the cultural landscape changes, some names keep like their power and meaning
Yeah.
like across generations, almost like a cultural anchor.
Totally. And then you've got names that are tied to a specific place.
Oh yeah.
Like Gwenaëlle, for example, that's a name you hear a lot in Brittany,
Oh.
which is this region in northwestern France with like a really strong Celtic heritage.
That's cool. So even within one country, you see these like little regional patterns, almost like little mini cultural ecosystems.
It's pretty amazing. It makes me think about like what were the popular names, when I was born.
And what do those names say about like that era? Like what values or I don't know, anxieties were shaping like what my parents named me, what other people were naming their kids.
Yeah, that's a really like insightful question. And it gets to another big idea from socionomastics,
Okay.
which is that names often signal things like social class
Oh, yeah.
or aspirations or like the communities that people belong to.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. The blog post, he had a couple of examples about this. Like,
Yeah.
names like Eleanor and Hugo were seen as kind of like upper class in France.
Yeah.
Whereas names like Jordan or Dylan are sometimes associated with working class families. And the case of like Kevin it kind of shows that.
It does. It shows this broader thing where names become these markers of like social standing.
Right.
And those perceptions, even though they're like subtle or subconscious, they can have a real impact on people's lives.
Yeah, for sure.
It makes you wonder, like, do certain names open doors
Yeah.
or create biases, even if we don't realize it's happening?
Right. It's almost like our names become part of our own personal like data sets.
Yeah,
And it's carrying all this information that other people, maybe consciously, maybe not, are using to judge us.
Right.
And it's not just like some made up thing. This is something that sociologists have been like researching for decades.
Exactly. And then it gets even more interesting when you add AI into the mix. The blogger talked about how he used a large language model to analyze his own name. His name is Gautier. And the AI was able to like accurately guess his birth year and his social background just from his name.
Wait, hold on. The AI guessed his social background from his name. How is that even possible?
Yeah, it's pretty wild. These AI models, they're trained on like massive data sets,
Yeah.
text code, all this stuff. And that lets them pick up on these really subtle like patterns and correlations that we as humans, like we might totally miss.
Yeah.
So in this case, the AI was able to connect like Gautier's name with all these other data points, like how common certain names were within certain like socioeconomic groups
Good.
during specific time periods. It's kind of like how a detective would use like a fingerprint, to figure out who a suspect is.
That's so cool. It's like the AI is like reading between the lines of our names.
Yeah,
Like finding these hidden connections and probabilities that we wouldn't even think about.
right.
Makes you wonder, like, what else these models could figure out,
Right.
just from something as simple as a name.
And that's what like researchers are really looking into right now. There's like a ton of work being done on how we can use AI to analyze names,
Okay.
to understand all sorts of things like historical migration patterns,
Wow.
cultural trends, even like potential career paths.
So you're saying it's not just about figuring out the past, but like
Yeah.
we can use names to maybe predict the future too.
In a way, yeah. Like some researchers are using AI to analyze like the names of scientists and entrepreneurs to see if they can find any patterns that might predict like future success in those fields.
Interesting.
It's early days, but the possibilities are pretty mind-blowing.
It really makes you think about like how much information is actually like embedded in our names.
Right.
Like stuff we don't even realize is there.
Yeah.
But I guess as with any technology, there's got to be like limitations to what AI can do.
Of course. Like the blogger, he points out that AI isn't some kind of like, magic solution.
Right.
For example, these models can have trouble with like unisex names or like timeless religious names like Marie. And cultures with very common surnames where the data might not be as like distinctive.
So it's like a tool that needs to be used carefully, I guess.
Exactly.
Along with like human expertise and, actually thinking critically about what we're seeing.
Right.
This actually brings up something else from the blog that I thought was really interesting. He was talking about how French surnames can often tell you not just like someone's region, but like the specific village they're from.
Oh, yeah. He gives the example of like Le Goff, which is really common in Brittany, and then Barthez in southern France. It's crazy how much geographical information is packed into just a last name.
It's like a whole family history right there.
Yeah.
Like their migration patterns, their connection to a specific place, it's all encoded in their name.
Yeah.
Like imagine if you could trace your own ancestry just through your last name.
Wow, yeah.
What kind of journey would that reveal?
That is a really cool thought experiment. And it really highlights how names are so much more than just labels, right?
For sure.
They're these threads that connect us to the past, to our families, to the places we come from.
Yeah.
And as we've seen, they can even offer glimpses into the future.
It's almost like our names are these tiny pieces of code,
Yeah.
each one with like a ton of information just waiting to be deciphered.
That's a great analogy. And the academic papers that we have, they go even deeper into this.
Oh, yeah.
They talk about how these like enriched data sets that we're getting now thanks to AI insights from names, they can be super valuable for things like historical research, understanding social dynamics, and even predicting trends.
So it sounds like socio-onomastics is becoming like a serious field of study now,
It is.
like with real-world applications.
Absolutely. And the implications are huge. I mean, think about it. This information, even if it's statistically derived, it can be used to categorize people, to profile individuals. We have to think really carefully about how these technologies are being used and what kind of safeguards need to be in place to protect people's privacy.
That is a really important point to consider. It feels like we're entering this whole new era where the data that's woven into our names could be used in ways that we never even imagined.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of exciting, but also a little, a little scary.
I know what you mean.
Yeah.
It really makes you realize that names are so much more than just, labels.
Right. They're like these little windows into history and culture and even our own identities, I guess. We've only just scratched the surface here.
Yeah, we have. I mean, we've seen how names act like these cultural time capsules, right? Reflecting all these societal trends and influences. And we talked about how they can signal things like social class and even reveal like where our families came from.
Yeah, all that geographical
And then
stuff.
there's that whole world of AI and how it's being used to, like, decode the information that's hidden in our names.
That's right. It's amazing what they can do now.
This deep dive has definitely made me think about my own name in a whole new way, I gotta say.
You too. I think we all need to pay more attention to names.
Yeah,
You know, the next time you meet someone new, don't just gloss over their name.
right.
Really think about it because it might be the beginning of a really fascinating story.